Greetings. Welcome to In Conversation with Trevor, brought to you by Heart and Soul Broadcasting Services. I go beyond the headlines and beyond the sensational. Today I'm in conversation with Thebe Ikalafeng, founder and chairman of Brand Africa. Enjoy this truly thought-provoking conversation. Thebe Ikalafeng, my brother, welcome to In Conversation with Trevor.
Thank you so much, Trevor.
I pinned you down. You have been to how many countries the past 4 days, 5 days?
The past 10 days, I've been to 5.
Which ones are those? And what were you doing? Which ones are those?
So I started my journey in Nigeria on Africa Day. And then 2 days later, I was in Ivory Coast. Then 2 days later, I was in Rwanda. And then I was back to South Africa, then to Lesotho, tomorrow to Uganda. But I'll tell you what I was doing. What I was doing is I was announcing the top 100 most admired brands in the continent, which is an initiative that I started through Brand Africa 12 years ago to really try and get a baseline understanding of what brands Africans are consuming and why.
We will get to talk about that, what brands Africans are consuming and why, and which ones they're not consuming. But I can't not focus on this as we start. Your life is amazing. You border on the line of a bit crazy, Thebe. You have so much energy, my brother. You love the continent. But here is what I can't understand. This is what you've done. You've summited Mount Kilimanjaro.
Yes.
You've summited Mount Elbrus. You've skydived in Swakopmund, Namibia. Bungee jumped the 216-meter tall Blokranz Bridge. Plunged into the coldest waters in the planet, in the Antarctica. Why do you do this crazy stuff?
I'm not sure if it's crazy, but I think friends of mine tell me that I've always been a bit on the edge in terms of adventure. But a whole lot of them, by the way, is quite interesting that how it all started or how it all evolved for me is as I traveled the continent, I started saying when I arrive at the country, I want to do a little bit more than just be a tourist. I just want to do a lot more. I want to eat. I want to sleep in the same place. I want to do the crazy things they do. But I think perhaps I just have a lot of energy and I need a place to burn it. And all these crazy things to me were just adding up to experiencing different things. But I'll tell you the truth is how the Kilimanjaro one started. Is as I was exploring my Pan-Africanism, or rather deepening my Pan-Africanism, and having been to many parts of the world, I asked myself a question that as an African, many of us are so quick to go everywhere else and to summit everywhere else, in other words, to be celebrated and to do great things everywhere else, but we never ever summited in our own continent. So to me, it was a very symbolic, philosophical moment. I said, let me first summit in the continent. Let me summit in Africa, because if I can stand on the highest point of my continent, then I can achieve anything else.
Apart from being an adrenaline junkie, what benefits, what has this done to you? What perspective has it given you?
It has, it breaks down fear. It makes you open-minded. It makes you believe you can achieve anything. It tests your resilience. It tests your resolve. It just pushes you beyond the ordinary. I mean, who wakes up at 1 a.m. and walks 8 kilometers or 8 hours rather in the middle of a dark night with a little torch to try and get to the top of a mountain that has just been sitting there for hundreds of years, not bothering anybody.
Who does that? Who does that? Why do they do that?
So and you know, the whole idea when it started, I said to myself, it's impossible that I could do this. I couldn't walk for 4 days and then on the last day I faced that peak of Kilimanjaro. But to me, it was a test of my resolve. It was a test of who I am.
I wouldn't do this. None of the stuff But I could try Mount Kilimanjaro, but all this stuff, I'm scared.
Elbrus was crazy. You know, Elbrus is all ice. And the guy was, as we walk in there, the guy says to us, oh, there's a few bodies there.
Where is Mount Elbrus, by the way?
That's the highest mountain in Europe. It's in Russia. It's on the border of Georgia.
Yeah.
And I remember standing on Georgia and the soldiers on top of the mountain where we were training before going to the summit. I said to him, oh, can I just stand here? He says, no, you can't come here. This is Georgia. You know, and you're allowed to come this side of the world. So it's in Russia.
Let's go on to what you're passionate about, which is Africa. And what does it mean to be African? As you've traveled to every African country, haven't you?
To every country.
And what have you summed up to be the meaning of being African?
Well, to me, it's and people always ask me that question and says, what is the common traits? What makes us African? And to me, it's that we are a resilient people. We are a resourceful people. We know how to reach deep and find solutions. We are a creative people. We know how to think out of the box. We are a very humane people and welcoming people. So to me, I found those traits so common, those common traits across the continent, and I found them in different experiences. I found them in experiences of leaving South Africa and arriving at a country not knowing anybody, and somebody says, you must come over to dinner to my house. Or, you know, I arrived in Senegal and I wanted to go to the Gambia, and I took a car in the middle of the night. We arrived at about 1 or 2 a.m. We arrived in the Gambia, at the border of the Gambia, at about 4 in the morning. And when we get there, they said to us, oh, you need insurance for your car to get across. I said, but the car is insured because we came with the driver. They said, oh, but it's insured for this side. You must get insurance this side. And this is 4 in the morning. So at that point, we then look at each other and we say, how are we going to get insurance this hour? Then there was some guy who looks like a tout outside. And he says, oh, don't worry about it. Let's go get an insurance for you. So we then get into some taxi with this guy. We drive about 5 or 7 minutes. We arrive at some dark, dingy place outside of a house. They're using phones to touch. And I'm asking them, what are they doing? He says, they're writing out policies. I said, policies? Surely this can't be legitimate. And then as we came to our turn, he ran out of policies. So what do you mean ran out of policies? He says, but maybe you can go next door. Just walk across. So we walk across now and we knock in the middle of this night, and this young man sleeping on a hot day in Senegal wakes up in little underpants and wake up and says, let me just go freshen up. goes out, he just goes outside, splashes water, puts on pants and comes out, and we touch him as well, and he writes out a policy. And then I asked him, these policies, what kind of policies are they? And then he says, I buy them up front. And then I pre-buy policies because we know that people like you will come here and will not have had one. Because, you know, the first inclination for some of us in Southern Africa, when that happens, we say, oh, that's just corrupt stuff. That stuff is not working. And I learned that, you know, it's that creativity I'm talking about, that resourcefulness about us as Africans.
The things that you've outlined as being the meaning of being African sound to me very positive. If they are, and you agree with me that they're positive, why are we in the state that we are in?
I think it's such a important question that I think we're in the state that we're in because I think as a people, and one can go country by country, is that we have lost the meaning of what of who we are as human beings first. You know, when I arrived in Madagascar, I stayed at an island in Saint-Marie, and I was speaking to the cook and the security there because we're in the middle of this luxury island, and I said to him, oh, I want to go see where you live. I want to go see where, you know, I want to go eat by your house today. It's like, oh, my house. I said, yes. And then ultimately, you know, we couldn't believe we then went to his place eventually. So in the middle of the night, we arrived at this very humble home. And when we left, he had a bit of tears in his eyes. And he said, he says, you know, my year is going to open up so much. My blessings. I said, why? He says, because people who come here, they see us just as security guards. They see us just as cooks. Wow. They don't see us as people. Today you treated me like a human being. You visited me in my home. So the reason we're in the state that we're in is because we've lost our humanity. We have lost our sense of purpose. We've actually lost some of the ideals for which our forefathers or great-grandfathers fought for. Because, you know, when they all imagined this Africa in the multiple phases of the continent, and let's say at the peak of it, which is perhaps 63, 64, which is the peak of it, and they imagined at the continent, the type of continent we can be. It was so idealistic, but we've lost all that. And because we've lost all that, it's frayed at the fabric of who we are. But at the core, at the basic level, all Africans are the same. We all want better. We're resourceful. We're welcoming. We're humane. And you see that in the most ordinary of people. And that's who I focus my energies on. Don't focus my energies mostly on the new elite, if you will.
When did you discover this passion for the continent? And what was the journey like?
So obviously, having been educated South Africa, America, you come with an idea of what success looks like. You come with an idea of, and when I started my working career in the US, you start thinking, oh, this is what working is like. It's like working for dressing the most beautiful clothes from England, from America, driving the best cars from Germany, drinking the best champagne from France, and all those. That's sort of the definition of success. But then once you get to that level, at some level, doesn't have to be at the highest level of it, you then begin to ask yourself questions of what does it all mean? Because now when you have one and two or three, what does it mean to you? To me, I think the turning point out of interest is when I had a conversation with the CEO of Samsung. And I asked and I said to him why, and it was a commercial discussion about the success of Samsung in South Africa, in Africa rather. I said to him, you guys are in every country in the continent. How possible is that? I said, why do you do so well? Because I'm coming out from a marketing and branding perspective. And he says to me, oh, that's because I've been to every country in the continent. That's a CEO. He says to me, I've been to, and he's a Korean. He says to me, I've been to every country in the continent. And I said, oh, that's amazing. I said, oh, and what do you do and how do you, he says, whenever I arrive in a country, I'll go eat with the ordinary people. I'll go shop where they shop. And he says, and I look at the countries and I look at the lights going down, the electricity going down. I look at the people making a plan. And then I said to myself as a business, I said to us as a business, says, we shouldn't be looking at these things as negatives. We should be asking ourselves the question, if the electricity goes down, is there an alternative way to look at this? Because the people here clearly are not giving up. They're finding solutions. How can we make it easier for them as a business? You know, that resourcefulness, that making a plan. And I said to myself, you know, the thing about us is we look down on our continent so much. And we look at the mistakes that the elite and the political elite have made. And we rather focus our energies on that rather than on who we are. So I said to myself, if somebody who is not an African has been to Africa, and when he travels, he's not staying at the 5 stars and being driven around. He lives with the people. I said, surely there's something wrong with me as an African who has not been to as many countries in Africa and doesn't have that relationship. Wow. But a second one is second one was quite an interesting one. Is Thabo Mbeki then did the opening of tourism, the tourism in Durban. I think it was 2003 in Durban, and he painted a picture of if he ever, and he was still President Mbeki then, and President in power, and he painted a picture of if he had time and he could take time away from the continent, what he would do. And he started painting a picture of the different spots of the continent, of the place where he says, I'll go to Ngorongoro crater and understand this. I'll go to this, to the Sources Flay. I would go to, and I started looking at the continent differently. So I'm now thinking, I'm not thinking anymore, you go to south of France, to Cannes. I'm thinking the beauty is here in our continent. And so that was beginning a level of a transformation.
Self-discovery.
A self-discovery for me. But then I think the third most important thing, I then asked myself the question that all of us look at ourselves as the first this, the first black to do this, the first generation of blacks to have access to XYZ. I asked myself the question, so when we're all gone, how will they remember us? What difference would we have made? And can I play a role in that? Can I use my platform? Can I use my reputation or my abilities to make a change? So that's sort of how the beginning of my transformation. And then I guess if there's other interesting moments, I had so many meetings, so many coffees, meals with the late Kenneth Kaunda at his house. We'll sit at his house, he'll be eating with his hands, eating, because he was a vegetarian, he eat his asatsa with these vegetables. And I listened to the stories of what they did for South Africa. And for the rest of the
continent of Southern Africa.
Of Southern Africa. I'd listened to his stories of how he tried to make a difference in Zambia in terms of transforming the country based on alleviating what the negatives that he experienced as he was growing. So all those began to have a subconscious play on me in terms of how do I transform? How do I become I don't want to say better African. I want to say, how do I become a meaningful African?
How do you market brand Africa and push back against the notion of Africa is one country, and we say Africa is not a country? First question. Then secondly, by marketing brand Africa, are you not reproducing the notion of Africa as a country?
Interesting. So, and I will begin it first as a traveler. So, I'll begin at a point of a South African. And when I travel the continent, people always like to ask me, how do you adjust in all these countries? Because these countries are not like your country. The roads, the food, the amenities, and all those. And I said to them, that's because we as Africans, when we travel, we take our countries with us. And I said, me, when I travel, I take only the passport, but I leave my country at my airport. So that when I arrive at a country, I'm able to add on to my experiences of who I am as a person. So that's how I travel the continent, and that's how I've been able to find joy in every country and to find the beauty in every country. So, and in doing that, I then begin to learn what is so common, what is common among us, but also appreciate that we are different, 55 countries, all at different levels of development, all at different levels of experiences, all offering different things. So when you sell the story of Africa, you don't necessarily sell the story of Africa as a country, because one of the defining characteristics about this continent is us, the people of Africa, is how we are and how we do things and who we are. So I begin to sell the continent perhaps on our character, perhaps on what distinguishes us, but also clarify that we are 55 different countries and respect all those. The same way that the Europeans are able to sell Europe, but they're also able to sell the difference between Switzerland and England and Italy and France and all those. So it's the same way, and people appreciate them for those different things. So
are there many Africans, in your experience, who are Pan-Africanists to the level that you are, the level that you're describing?
Do you know, the many Africans. I think the challenge for most of us is because we have not traveled much. We have not had the opportunity to appreciate us. And by traveling, it enables you to appreciate yourself and to appreciate the other and to find the common bounds. So I'm not sure there are many Africans who have done that, because a whole lot of us do not have the ability to travel. We don't have the ability to travel because it takes you 30 to 40 visas to get across the continent. There's so many complications of trying to get into the different countries. And but not only that, we also have attitudes about each other. We focus on the stereotypes of each other rather than on the on celebrating the differences about each other.
But
there's pockets of people. I mean,
Yeah.
I've come across interesting people who've traveled, but very few people have traveled the way I have, which is I've traveled to find myself in every place. I've not traveled to go look at places and then look at them differently and say that I'm better than them. But I try to say...
It sounds to me like it's a conscious mindset shift that requires you to be open-minded about experiencing other people in their spaces and appreciating them for who they are, and seeing that as a self-discovery journey, isn't it?
Correct, because it is in the end. Because every new person you meet, they add something to you, but they also give an opportunity. But you have to be open to it, and being open to it is a very difficult thing. It's difficult because it means you have to let go or you have to let
your
go
assumptions of who I am,
and yes, of the other.
Yeah.
Because remember, you arrive with assumptions.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I said. You must leave. You must leave everything
not
about.
Easy, isn't it? It's not easy because we have become so attached to what our colonial masters created, which is the boundaries.
Indeed.
If there's anything that our colonial masters created, who oppressed us, we like them for, we don't dislike them for what they did, are the boundaries that they left for us. We hold on to those dearly, and we will fight to protect the boundaries that the colonizers. So it's a decolonization of the mind of some
sort. The decolonization of the mind. It's all, but also I think that some of the reasons we hold on to those colonial boundaries is for selfish reasons, and particularly if you look at the politicians, because a lot of them have lost the reasons, have lost first, they don't have a vision for the continent. And forget the vision for their own countries. Most of them have got the visions for themselves. And because of that vision for themselves, I have not enabled people to unleash people, so people can flourish. But I mean, but there's pockets. You know, if you look at a country like Rwanda, with a leader with a very clear vision for the country, who's enabled the country to be able to define itself, and in that, and also has opened the country to other Africans to come in and explore and discover the country. By doing that, it allows people to grow. Yeah. So yes, it's very difficult to let go.
How do you, as you travel the African countries all across the continent, how do you explain the xenophobia in South Africa? How do we explain that? Point number one. Point number two, what conversations do you have with our fellow South African colleagues about the continent and what's happening as far as this Afrophobia, which is directed at people of African origin rather than any immigrants? What conversations do you have with your fellow Africans and our South African compatriots?
Do you know, I was arriving in Ghana. Then I took out my passport to the immigration guy. Then he takes my passport, and then he looks up and says to me, "Why do you treat our people like that?" And moments like those are very difficult moments because you realize that when you arrive at these different countries and people welcome you as they've welcomed you, and you reflect back on some of the challenges that we faced, challenges of xenophobia and all those. So part of the ways I try to, it's such a difficult thing to explain because the truth of the matter is there's two sides to this to the story. The one side to the story has got to do with the challenges that South Africa faces, socioeconomic challenges that South Africa faces. But then, like everybody else, when you cannot deal with the enemy, you find the weaker person to deal with. So if you look at a country like South Africa, where the challenges about poverty, challenges about violence, challenges about gender-based violence, challenges about and all those. So when the people themselves cannot fight, quote unquote, the system, cannot fight the politics, they then look around them. And when they look around them and they see that other people who've come to South Africa have been able to find a way to flourish in the country, create opportunities for themselves. They then look at that and they said, well, here is somebody who's taking away something from me. But the truth of the matter is, the challenge for us South Africans, because we're a bit of a nanny state. And we're a bit of a nanny state, and there's a bit of an entitlement. I mean, if you look at our country, for example, we at what 30% or so of the people on the dole
grants, social grants,
are receiving a social grant. Then you look at 34% of the people are unemployed, and more than 50% of them are young people. So, so in the absence of them finding a solution, they then find a victim to blame, and they look at the person. So when I try to what I try to explain to people is that at the core of who we are as South Africans, we're actually very welcoming people, very warm people. We're very and the problem that we face as a people is because the conditions are so difficult for the ordinary South Africans, and because the solutions don't seem to be close or near or obvious, that people are merely expressing their frustrations. But of course, there's another third side to it. The third side to it is the fact that most South Africans do not know their history well, because one of the unfortunate things post-apartheid in South Africa is we were not able to institutionalize our history. And, you know, when I was growing up, I remember I had to learn about the fort. I had to learn about Jan van Riebeeck, who landed in 1652 here, Simon van der Stel, all those. That's how the apartheid system was able to institutionalize it. We now look at this, the Dutch people who came here, who were supposed to have been just stopping by, but came here and saw how beautiful and how rich the country is and made something out of it. Part of how they made a success of it is to, one, to institutionalize who they are, and second, obviously, to separate, to create barriers. What we failed to do in South Africa post-94 is to institutionalize our history, is to conscientize people to our history. And when I talk about our history, I'm not just talking about the apartheid history. I'm talking about our Pan-African history, talking about how the late President Kenneth Kaunda, said to me, my own people wanted to lynch me, to kick me out of government, because they felt that I was sacrificing our hard-earned democratic gains and money that could be used for our children's schools and
for education, the freedom of Zimbabwe
and South Africa, because they gave us homes, they gave us opportunities and all those. Now, a lot of South Africans do not know that. I mean, not a lot of South Africans. I'm talking about, obviously, because the majority is a young country. I mean, South Africa is a very young country.
50%, yeah.
And most of them do not know that. So they have no sense of appreciation that when a non-South African comes into South Africa to seek for opportunities, they as economic migrant or as political migrant, it's in the same way that we did in the 50s, in the 60s, into those countries. Yeah. Now, when you have that appreciation, you perhaps will look at things differently. That's the one side, and then, like I said, the other side, if there's a clearer education, if there was a clearer path to prosperity in South Africa, and a more equal society, and opportunities accessible, perhaps people will not be quote unquote xenophobic. So to South Africans, I don't try and explain South Africans the history of South Africa, because they ought to know it. I perhaps just try to contextualize how I am received in other countries.
I'm interested in knowing what you said to the Ghanaian guy who took your passport and said, "Why do you treat our people so bad?"
You know, it's a moment at the counter, and first I was shell shocked, because it's not the first question. The first question is, what are you coming to do here? And how long are you going to be here?
Yeah. That's the question. Welcome to Ghana, my friend.
And when you arrive in Ghana, it says Akwaba. That's the first thing he says. He says, welcome. And so I was a bit shell-shocked at a minute. But I said the same thing that I said to you earlier, which is, it is not us. That's not who we are as a people. We are, at our core, we're a very welcoming and warm people as a country.
If you're confused about healthcare, it's easier to put your trust in us. where every contribution is secure and you can be sure that your membership card will be accepted. So relax, you're in safe hands with us. With access to world-class medical providers, little to no shortfalls, and free iGo membership for all our Seamless members. Join us today. Together, we make a difference.
So, Thebe, what are you finding as far as the brands rather that Africans prefer and why they prefer those brands? Essentially, I'm saying you've been running around the continent over the past 5 days. What are those surveys telling you about what our preferences are? Are we buying our own brands? Are we buying African brands? If so, which ones? If we're not buying African brands, what are we buying and why are we buying those brands rather?
You know, I started the survey in 2011 and approached my friends at Cantor and later at Geopol to bring the teams together because I wanted to have a very well-informed view about the continent, and I wanted it to be not just a personal view. I wanted it to be a very science-based view about the continent and where we are. And over the last 12 years, on average, only 20% out of the top 100 brands in the continent that Africans admire, only 20% are made in Africa. So, and I always try and explain it to people in a different way. I said to them, in other words, 80% of our wealth is outsourced. I said, it means, in other words, if the 80% of the tax revenue that could have been generated for here, or the jobs, or the creativity, or anything else is outsourced. So if only 20% of the brands that we admire are made in Africa, there's a challenge and a question we should ask ourselves. And you look at where those brands are coming from. 28% of them are coming from America. 35% of them are coming from Europe. 17% of them are coming, or 20% of them are coming from Asia. And only 17% come from Africa. So Africa is the lowest. So we consume the lowest. So it's a continent that is very consumerist. It's a continent that is not creating. For a creative continent, it's actually said that we're actually more consumers than creators. And because a lot of the things that we are seeing around why people do that is because we find a lot of validation in Western validation in Western culture. So to me, to have arrived is to drive a Ferrari, to wear a Rolex, to drink Dom Perignon or any one of those. That to me is a mark of success. So as an African, and that's why when you go, when you watch us on our rap shows, when you watch us on the TV shows, when you watch us on our social media, we are brandishing the rest of the world. But we forget the most important thing, that those countries, they are selling their countries, and we are selling ours short. And you know, when I went to Cannes, which is south of France, for the biggest advertising awards in the world, and I was watching the work that was winning. All the work that the Brazilians were putting forward and was winning told the story of Brazil. Wow. The stories were told in their ways. All the work from Britain, all the work from America had the character and the tonality of their countries. Most of the work that comes from Africa tries to look like them. So we try to be French, we try to be British, we try to be American, we romanticize those countries and everything that comes from those countries. I don't have any problem, by the way, with any of those countries, because I think in a global world, you must have the blend of both, in the same way that that they have they consume some Africans. And so to me, the biggest thing I found the challenge is the self-rejection of Africans, because ultimately it's a self-rejection of who we are if we can't appreciate where we come from and what comes from us.
Wow. We had Patti Sanyati, who is passionate about culture. And one of the things that he said was, our culture is denigrated by people who are not us. But the saddest thing is that we participate in the denigration
Oh, very much
of
so.
our own culture and our own values. Would you agree with that notion?
Oh, very much so. You know, I'm giving a talk in a few weeks, and the question was Africa relevant or relegated? It's a topic, and I didn't even come up with the topic. They gave me they said to me, "Could you speak to this topic? Is Africa relevant or is Africa relegated?" I said, why should we use words like relegated in an African conversation? Of course we're relevant. You know, I said, if you look at Stella McCartney, look at Gucci, look at all of them, they come to Africa, they get inspiration from us, creative inspiration from us. The minerals come from us, the iron and the steel, everything comes from Africa. So we must be relevant in the big world. But the truth of the matter is we are relegated because we are the ones participating in the denigration of Africa. We look down on African culture. So we say if somebody is from Ndebele or somebody is Ashanti, we call that primitive, or we call that too traditional. But if somebody is from wearing something from Britain or speaking with a French accent, we celebrate that. But if an African cannot speak French,
English or French,
or English in
like the French in English,
correct? Yeah, even African can't speak French like a French. They're like, oh my God, this. But if a French can't speak English,
it's all right.
We're like, oh, that's so sexy, because we love that, and we're like, oh, I just love how the French say that.
Say English.
But when an African can't do that, they're like, that's so primitive. You're so unrefined, because we look down on it. You know, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, amazing thinker, as you know. Obviously, you know, he was jailed for refusing to write in English. And, you know, at some stage in his career, about 30, 40 years ago, he decided he wants to write in Kiswahili and then be translated to English, rather than to write in English and be translated to Kiswahili. He said something very, very important. He said, if a man or a woman can express themselves better in a foreign language and less so in their birth language, then they are enslaved. So a whole lot of us are enslaved because we can express ourselves in many ways, and expression is in many ways.
Absolutely.
Do you know, you must admire a woman like Esther Mahlangu, because Esther has got those Ndebele chains, Ndebele adornments, which are made out of brass on the legs and on the necks. And beads. But that neck brace, you put it on when you get married, and it only takes off when you're dead. And she travels anywhere else in the world, and she never goes anywhere other than Esther Mahlangu. And she's incredibly aware of who she is as a person, and she is being accepted and celebrated for who, of course, in many ways she's I guess been put on a pedestal or put as a. Are you with me?
Yes,
but in many ways, what I appreciate about her is whenever she travels anywhere else, and I said to Mama, how do you go through those machines? Tina, you just have a little pin in your pocket,
take it out.
And they said, take it out, and you've got all the entire steel from ArcelorMittal with you that you go through, and nobody stops you. He says, that's who I am. They have to accept me. So we need to have some of that attitude. That's who I am. That Ngugi wa Thiong'o attitude. That Esther Mahlangu attitude.
The other thing that you're passionate about is our property rights, and that is that we don't leverage nor protect our property rights. And you have examples of ideas that have been stolen from Africa. Would take us through some of those in terms of marketing and brand building.
Oh, I mean, and you know, I like to speak about different big examples from different countries. Let's speak about Ethiopia, which is the one country which was never colonized. Well, it was tested for 4 years by the Italians, but never fully colonized. And you know, coffee comes from Kaffa. In Ethiopia, and Starbucks, and Starbucks, which was importing coffee from Ethiopia, started using Ethiopian names and all those, and charge, and obviously got a premium for selling the coffee and using Ethiopian names and all those. So the Ethiopians, then they decided, but we got to challenge this. That's our intellectual property. Those names are indigenous to who we are, to the countries where we come from, and they challenged them on that. And it took about 3 years. And what they then did differently, the Ethiopians, the coffee society there, they decided we need to do the same thing they do to us. We need to brand our stuff, and we need to raise the values of them. So the next time they come knocking, we sell them for the same price that they are making. It was a long protracted battle, but ultimately the Ethiopians won, and they get more money out of the coffee growers, because the coffee growers were getting like peanuts, and Starbucks was making more money. And now the roles were reversed, and because they fought for their intellectual property. Because we have a lot of times in this continent where our ideas are expropriated.
Do you have another example?
I mean, I'll use a recent one. Makosa, who's a South African young designer, and he created. Obviously, he deduced his designs from the Xhosa culture. And one day I was out of the country. Text me a message. He sends me a picture. He says to me, "Can you believe they are selling socks in London, which look exactly like my socks?" And he says to me, they've stolen my idea. He says, we can't allow it. I said, "Oh, just calm down. We will deal with this." And this was Zara, and Zara is a mega Spanish brand. And says they have taken my ideas, and of course we took Zara on for this.
Did you win the case?
Well, we arrived at some resolution with Zara, and it's still not wholly resolved, but at least they were willing to engage us. But 3-4 years going. So we have a lot of those examples across the continent, from as big as the coffee, as I said, to as small. But you look at, for example,
big. Xhosa thing is big. It's
but
huge.
you look at the Maasai as well, and the Maasai, the same thing. What the Maasais have been able to do now, they've been able now to trademark. To trademark anything with Maasai, the pattern, the cloth. So when people like Louis Vuitton, all those are using that idea, they are now paying a royalty. But you can go to another big example, rooibos. Rooibos is indigenous to Western Cape, to in particular a community in the Western Cape and near the mountains. And now remember, somebody took the rooibos in 1994 and trademarked it in America, and said and they said, anybody uses rooibos anywhere, they must pay me a royalty. That was challenged because then the community in Western Cape was able to fight this for many years. I think last year or 2 years ago, the community won the what you call geographic indication, which means that if something is indigenous to a place, you cannot take the trademark away from those people. So now it becomes a trademark that is indigenous to the people of the Western Cape, that particular part where rooibos comes from. So we got lots of those from country to country where our ideas are taken. Where our ideas are taken and we don't fight. What we need in this continent is we need the ability to fight for our intellectual property. I mean, that's one of the reasons that I decided, to, in addition to do my master's in law, for that particular reason of intellectual property. Because I said I wanted to get a better idea of how we can fight for our fight. How we can fight.
It's good that we're winning some. It's disappointing, though, that you believe that our young people, professionals in marketing, instead of being authentic, they're actually fighting to fit in. And if we're saying across the continent, 50% of the people are young, so the problem that we're talking about is actually being replicated by our young people who think that it's much more sexy to have foreign brands than to have local brands. This is going to be an ongoing problem.
Because we don't validate them up here in our own countries. Because until we validate and celebrate and remunerate them for that, they will always look outside. Because when a young person comes and puts forward an idea that is Afrocentric, for example, it is looked down on. But when somebody comes up with something else, but actually the bigger problem is who is the decision maker.
You're right.
That's actually the biggest the problem that we're facing. That when I come to present my idea, or I try to sell something, or I try to create something, and Trevor doesn't come from the same culture. So African Trevor is not African, if you will, of African descent, if you will, and it looks down on this idea, and Trevor is discouraged from pursuing that idea. You know, I was asked the other day about the transformation in advertising in South Africa. And I tried to explain that that in 2002 I stood on a podium in Centum Convention and spoke about the need to transform our creative product, so that our stories must be told in a way that we can relate to, in a way that not only relate to, but also that helps people to understand us. You know, like Mandela once said, if you speak to a man, in their language, it goes further.
It opens doors.
It opens doors. And the relationship is better.
Has there been transformation within the South African industry? I mean, you were chairman of the Lorries and Art Focus. In a nutshell, has there been transformation?
No, not really. No. We're still the same. We're still stuck in the same place. Because if there was transformation, we would not be having the recent debates which we had in South Africa now by the South African Human Rights Commission, which looked into transformation in the industry. We will not be having the government of South Africa having to come up with a new charter or a new regulatory body to regulate transformation. There's been absolutely no transformation. There's been a lot of lipstick on a pig, if you will, in terms of there's been a lot of fronting for over the years. But I think the problem has been, as I said, at the decision-making level. That us as the marketing directors of companies, unfortunately, we just have the titles, and we don't
make decisions.
But we don't really make the decisions, because the decisions are made in golf courses and in farmhouses on weekends. And our job is just to carry through those mandates. And we try to change that story, we lose our jobs. Do you want me to lose my house and my car and my status and my golf membership just for the sake of doing something that means something to somebody? 80% of a continent. I'd rather please 20%.